So welcome to episode 10 of the Deep Analysis podcast, We Love Ugly Data. And to celebrate getting into double figures, we're doing a slightly different setup for this one. The format is slightly different, but more or less the same. We'll come to that in a second. As you know, this is the time of the year when everybody likes to do predictions about what's going on in 2024. It's the law. By that token, we're no different. We have to do it. We've actually got something that we're recording this on the 5th of December. Maybe by the time you see this, the predictions long form paper will be out. It contains 11 predictions. Why 11? Well, 11 because spinal tap. Why spinal tap? Maybe ask a parent, a guardian, an older person about spinal tap, and they'll explain why 11 is important. But there's 11 predictions in there. What I thought we would do for this this edition of the podcast was actually to bring Alan and Dan on. We're going to each pick one of the predictions from the 11, spend a couple of minutes talking about it, then as a group we'll discuss them. So we're not going to cover all 11. It's not going to be a monster. It's still going to be 30 minutes. And anyway, as we know, part of the format is discussing the format. So the format this time, we've got 3 predictions to talk about, 30 minutes to talk about them. So it's roughly about 10 minutes of prediction. As there's 3 of us on here and we all like to talk, I'm going to be launching the stopwatch even more like a hawk than I normally am. So if I start to interrupt people and tell them that the time has been wound up, if you want to discuss it more, you're going to have to contact us for a proper inquiry time and do it that way. And of course, that opportunity is always open if you want to. Let's get into the first of the predictions, and because I'm organising it, my one's going first. So from the 11, we've got one, and it's the one that I put in, which is generative AI will face its first cold winter. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, what I absolutely don't mean is that generative AI is terrible, it's going to destroy the world. Generative AI doesn't work. It has no future. We can park all those discussions because whether we like it or not, and as a group, we're kind of fond of it for various reasons. We know this is something which is coming, and for some organizations is already there. So why am I talking about it being a first cold winter? Well, if we look at 2023, that's almost out of the way for us now. We're around a year into the big sort of cycle where everybody who hadn't heard it before suddenly heard about it. Everybody who'd been biting their tongue for a while to want to talk about it also talked about it, and everybody shouted at the same time, which was kind of interesting. It meant that you could not move at conferences anybody from talking about it. Now the nights have started to draw in, and even though it's just after 3 p.m. in the UK, you can see how dark it is here in my office. Now the lights are drawing in, people are starting to think, practically, what does this mean for us? And that's what I mean about this first cold winter. It's going to be very much that period of, now we've got through the exciting announcements and enthusing about how the world is suddenly going to change. What does that mean for us? So what are we going to be talking about in this cold winter? Well, I think there's probably 2 chunks we can talk about. There's the kind of tactical, so what we're doing right now, and maybe the strategic that we start to talk about in the next sort of few months. Well, right now people are thinking about how can I use these tools that have suddenly appeared or are just about to appear from my incumbent suppliers in the way that I'm working today. And the primary ways actually that I'm hearing that people are picking up and using it right way is some of the areas that we talked about. We'll put some links in the show notes about how generative AI and LMMs particularly being used around code development. So if you think about some of the stuff we talked about last time about citizen development, people are starting to use these that have been trained against proprietary code bases to help speed up development, to help code complete. Now, anybody who's used an IDE, a development interface at any point in the last 20 years will know that the idea of autocomplete for code is not a new thing. So we're not talking about something which is revolutionary. We're talking about something which is evolutionary, and as such, it kind of fits into the ways in which we work right now. So that's something that I think we're seeing already. That's where an awful lot of the kind of enthusing is talking about it. The second set, which is what are the new ways in which we can work, and one of the primary areas around the new ways of working is integrating enterprise data. So all that stuff you already have alongside AI into how your organization might work in the future. Now, this is causing awful lot of discussion inside organizations because all of a sudden, people who haven't really paid an awful lot of attention to their enterprise data and how they keep it suddenly have to. people who are backgrounds in compliance are suddenly had to think about this as a new way of looking after the assets for the organization. So this is another thing that in those long, cold, dark nights around the fireplace, or whatever you have in your organization, which would serve as a fireplace, a place to think about it, how are we going to actually wrangle our organizational data to do this? And for some organizations who are looking at getting to this early, one of the things that they're realizing is that actually a large amount of their information security policies around who can see what's inside the organization has been based on whether anybody actually had a look for stuff. As soon as you put this in front of a piece of technology that reads everything and will tell you everything, they're realizing that those firewalls inside the organization who have permission to see this, who had the permission to read this, may not be maybe more permeable than they realized beforehand. And they're only starting to notice that when they're starting to go through audits and early adoption. So in summary, those long, cold, dark winters don't mean that generative AI isn't a great thing. What we're talking about here is actually some of the real world lessons in adopting that, and actually how you're finding that to appear inside your organization. I talked for a little bit longer than I intended. I'm going to hand over Dan, if you're on the line there. And anything you'd like to add on this particular subject?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good lead-in, I think, to what I'm going to talk about. The first cold winter. So,
well, I can see you're by a fireplace there, so you're in the right place.
Yeah, right there in the background. So, right on schedule, our boiler broke on December 1st.
Oh no!
That's an annual event, so we are facing. I would counter by saying that with all the GPUs running around the world now in data centers, it's actually going to heat. It's going to create another factor for global warming, all the Gen AI stuff, because every time you use ChatGPT or any of the iterations of the chatbots out there, every time you do that, there's some server someplace out there in the world that's heating up. Basically.
Well, not only that, as we discussed previously, and a little click on the meter as another few dollars go on your bill.
That's right, absolutely. So yeah, generally speaking, I agree with you, Matt. There's quite a few startups we've talked to this year that are going to be facing a very cold winter because they spent their seed round last year, but they don't yet have anything to ship and make money on yet. Yeah, so it's going to be very cold, literally, in some offices around the world. So yeah, you're going to be huddling around the servers for warmth. Yeah, we'll find out why they call it a heat sink.
Well, there you go. Alan, you've been listening unusually quietly at this point.
I have been unusually quiet, haven't I? No, listen, I think we've had a really healthy debate, a deep analysis, and I think you summarized it well. We're not against generative AI. We actually think it's really quite brilliant stuff. Yeah. But we've been around the block a few times, and you have launches of new things. There's all the hype, and then it takes years before it really becomes sort of part of the woodwork, right? And we've seen this time and again. Generative AI certainly had its moment, and one day so will quantum, right? There's all these things coming. I think the other thing I would just add very quickly here is I think completely unintentionally, all the discussion around ChatGPT and all the shenanigans at OpenAI, I think that's opened a big, much wider debate than anybody wanted around trust and accuracy, and forget the technology. Just, do I even trust this? Do I trust you? Do I trust you, OpenAI? Do I trust you, Google? Do I trust And it'd be interesting how that plays out, because that ain't going away anytime soon.
Well, I suppose if one thing did come out of the OpenAI shenanigans, and I will put links in the show notes to our research paper or our blog post about that recently, is that it probably opened up the landscape larger, because people will start to go, well, maybe they're not the only show in town, and maybe this isn't an entirely functionally operative organization, given the way that their relationship between the employees and board works. do we really want to put all our eggs in their basket, or do we even want to touch that basket at all? That potentially opened up a kind of a plurality moment for other providers of foundation models to lever their way into enterprise thinking.
Yeah, or maybe this just isn't ready for us in the enterprise yet. And
Well, what is ready for us now is a prediction so large that I had to reduce the font size to fit it in. So Dan, this was yours. So prediction number 2: for the first time in human history, machines will read and process more documents than knowledge workers. Does that mean there's lots of machines or less knowledge workers? Maybe you need to expand on this.
Yeah, Matt, I sent you the. There was supposed to be a soundtrack to introduce this.
I'm sorry, we're in low. This is a low budget thing. We don't have any sounds associated with it.
Yeah. It was supposed to be fanfare for the common man.
Oh, I see.
It kind of, for the first time in human history.
So we're like the poor man's Emerson, Lake and Palmer for knowledge here.
Oh yeah, don't get me started. Favorite band. Okay, so anyway, one of the nice things about doing predictions for next year is that I actually have 12 months for this to come true. It doesn't have to be true on January 1st. Let's all keep this in mind. Unlike Matt's prediction about the cold winter, his has to be true on January 1st.
That's true.
Mine doesn't have to even start to look true until December 31st of 2024. So we got a long way. That's how to do a prediction, by the way. Put it so far out there that everybody forgets it. So anyway, there's some of this was tongue in cheek when I wrote this prediction, guys. But then the serious part is this, okay? I think that because of the proliferation of tools from Microsoft that are going to roll out over the next 12 months across enterprises, whether they want them or not, Alan. People are going to start using whatever it's called, Copilot, Chat, whatever their thing is. They're going to start using it to read documents because they're pretty good at reading documents. They're not perfect, but they're really darn good at reading a lot of documents. And this is what intelligent document processing has been working on for 50 years. We did our 4 waves, Matt, back in May.
Yes.
And wave 1 was, gee, it would really be nice if we could, read these documents. And it's taken us 50 years to get to this point. But generative AI and LLMs together have put us on the precipice of what I think is going to be an amazing transformation in knowledge work, to the point where I believe by the end of 2024, that anybody that works in a Microsoft Office 365 setting that is using Copilot, they're going to say to their boss, no, I'm not going to read those documents. I want the computer to do it. So don't give me any work like that anymore, because the machine's doing it for me. Why would I spend my time having to read a 20-page contract? I can just put it over here and Copilot will summarize it for me. I think that that's going to change the way that knowledge workers go about their day, just simply because the technology has finally got to the point where it's possible to have it read our documents without having to do all these adjustments and training and all the things we've had to do for many years to try to get accurate document reading. So that's why I'm pretty excited about it, since I cover IDP for deep analysis. You guys hear me over and over again saying this is all about the machine reading and understanding documents. That's what it's all about. So I'm pretty excited. I give you're supposed to also sometimes, as a predictor, give a sort of confidence level score, right?
Okay, yes.
Yeah, so I'm going to give this one a 50% chance of happening in 2024.
Okay, that's very much hedging your bets, really, Dan, isn't it?
Yeah.
By December 31st.
Well, okay, all right. So 50-50, and you're giving yourself a full, well, we're on the 5th of December, so actually over 12 months to do it. Whereas you pointed out, I've stupid enough gone, oh, it's going to happen very, very soon. I'm already there because winter is already cold. So that at least gives me a little bit of a head start there. Alan, you want to come in on this?
Oh, I mean, I don't disagree with Dan, but I've got a webinar coming up tomorrow, and I've actually just emailed a bunch of documents to Sandra to print out so I can go upstairs and read them on paper. So I guess I'm just told Luddite or something. But no, you're right. I mean, you know, like when I was saying about, you know, generative AI, is it ready for the enterprise? No, I mean, you're 100% right. At the desktop, yeah, definitely. No disagreements with that. I just think some of the use cases that come up, you know, we've talked about this before, but like in legal, you know, I mean, is it ready for that?
Well, I think that's, even though it's supposed to be your response, I'm going to jump in because the word document, oh my word, does that hide a multitude of potential sins, right? Because a document can be anything from, you know, a piece of product marketing to a legal contract where the missing of a specific clause or the incorrect annotation of a particular line can mean the difference between litigation being successful or failure, or worse, if we're talking about something medical, life and death. So, you know, documents in your prediction, nice and broad. And I think to go back to my one, when I talked about the use of data, well, the more specialist you go, the more enterprise data is required. So, yeah, I'm feeling like you can probably argue your one might even be true now, Dan.
Well, I made this so broad that it's impossible to really debate me.
Well done. Kudos on that.
Yeah. I totally agree, guys, because I see that as well when I talk to vendors and customers, right? Document processing is actually never going to be automated 100%. I'm just going to say that's my other prediction. Okay, it's never, because there's such an incredible variability in the way that human beings present and make documents, right? And even within, I just got off of a call with one of our clients talking about this. Even within a very structured document called a bank statement, right? The endless variability is driving them crazy, and that's just bank statements, right?
Yep.
And we're not even close to having machines read more than half the bank statements. We're probably going to get there faster with those than we will with legal contracts or anything that involves research, anything that involves medical research, particularly. I think we have to be very careful. But I think what we'll see is a sort of cascading thing where you start off with the low-hanging fruit of documents, right? And then it starts to work its way out, and then users will push back and say, well, hey, it does a really good job reading the W-2 tax forms, okay, because that's not hard. Why can't it read the form, whatever, K, the one that's got 10 pages and a bunch of handwriting in it, and think, why can't it do that? And I think that'll push it forward, where knowledge workers are on this track that's just never going to end of, I want the machine to do this for me.
Yeah. I think something else I think that's worth pointing out is that, I mean, we use Microsoft as an example. You brought them up at the top. Copilots are being available for Microsoft customers who have enterprise agreements. That's basically the limitation at the moment. So if you've got 300 seats plus and a direct relationship with Microsoft as a result of that, or an EA through a partner, then you are able to pay your extra $30. If you haven't, you are not. You have no access to it, and there's no date for that to happen. Now, I don't know what the differentiation is in the US, for argument's sake, between the number of businesses across the country who are 300 people or lower, and how much of a percentage of the workforce that takes. That's another inhibitor we need to watch. That, you know, we don't see something that is only open to larger organizations and not the huge number of organizations globally who are also all users of IT every day who don't have access to the technology yet, just because it's not available from their licenses. So that's something else.
Yeah, Matt. I agree with that. But here's what's also going to happen. ChatGPT and its ilk are sort of like, remind me of the mobile apps that came out 10 years ago that IT said you can't use that. Yeah, right. So as knowledge workers, we went out and we assembled the tools that we felt were going to do the job, and we didn't tell IT about it.
Correct.
Now, that works in a lot of companies. Some it doesn't work in, obviously, right? But in a lot of companies, people are going to BYO bot. Bring their
Yeah.
own bot, okay? They are. And if their company is not using Copilot because they don't want to pay for it, I guarantee you, people are going to be doing work on the sly using ChatGPT with their own subscription.
Yep.
So that's not going to stop people from doing this. It's going to be difficult for IT, and that's what we're going to find out now. BYOD is so yesterday, right? So
Well,
now we're into BYOB, bring your own bot.
Well, Alan, that means that we'll have to drag out all the research that we wrote sort of 10, 12, 15 years ago about enterprise file sync and share, and how to control that inside the organization, and how to look at audits for use and all that stuff. We can just blow the dust off it, cross out enterprise file sync and share, write AI in it, and then just resell it. So good news for analysts with a back catalog.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you were there, Matt. I always remember there was an event in New York, and I was supposed to be presenting. It was really high level, right? It was the cream of Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked in there, and I was going to tell them what file sync and share was, and oh no, they already knew. It was running right across Wall Street. You know? Publicly, absolutely not. Nobody was using it. And it was absolutely outlawed. And you're right. Shadow IT, bring your own bot. You'll never stop it.
And bridging nicely. And I guess one of the distinctions here is that going back to what I was talking about, actually one of the conundrums that's facing organizations is over how to wrangle their data such to make it useful inside these use cases for the future. Now, your prediction is knowledge graphs and data meshes gain traction. I'm guessing these two things are not unconnected.
No, they're not unconnected. And we could add another one in there, which is sort of orchestration, right? Because they're all part and parcel. Orchestration, knowledge maps, data meshes, they're all part and parcel of the same thing. I mean, we go on about it all the time, and so we should, right? You take these briefings, and here's this thing. It plugs in, you switch it on, and it does some magic. Yeah, and then you actually spend some time with, I remember Papyrus, their event in Austria. There was just one particular presentation from a client, and it was just this tiny little upgrade to a customer service thing. Mm-hmm. And they went into immense detail. They really went into immense detail, but it was just a great reminder of, you know, what looks like a little blob on a marketing slide, right? It's actually dozens of little components all interdependent. And if this OS isn't upgraded and this plugin isn't here and this, IT is really complicated. There's so many. I mean, again, when we see briefings and there's a blob on a chart that says Salesforce or SAP. That SAP reality, if you were ever to open up a system diagram, it would cover the walls of your house.
So these knowledge graphs and data meshes, and I'm putting you on the spot here slightly, that's meant to make these things easier?
It doesn't make them easy, but it makes them more navigable. I think that's the point here, right? So with data meshes and orchestration, you're dealing with the fact that, you know, data's everywhere. There's an enormous amount of it. There's lots of processes. There's lots of tasks. And it's just impossible to manage. So they offer a possibility. They're not magic bullets. They're not, you know, they're not going to save the world here. But data meshes and orchestration absolutely should be big in this coming year, because without them, it's not going to happen, is my point, right? You need something where you can at least get some form of unity, some sort of single pane of glass, to use that awful phrase, where you can actually start, you know, making the connections between these disparate systems and data silos. And similarly with knowledge graphs, right? Again, they've been around a long time, but their day is definitely now, or is coming very soon, because again, how do you make connections between things, right? We've been talking a lot about LLMs and stuff. And, you know, one of the great use cases, I would say, for generative AI is customer service, right? Because maybe your answer is included in 4 different documents in 4 different places, and the LLM can pull it together into a single answer. That's the genesis, if you like, of a knowledge graph. How is this data connected to this? How is this person connected to that department? How is that project connected to that past project? And it's these tools that give you a map that you can define, that you can control, that you can manage, they're absolutely essential for the enterprise. They're hard concepts to explain to people, though. So again,
well, I guess it's because I think an awful lot of these solutions that are described certainly are the kind of vendor architecture as lakes.
yeah,
All your data goes here, or all your data stays where it is, and you connect it together.
it all goes here.
Are kind of conceptually difficult for people. Maybe it's the time when we kind of finally realize what all the investment went into Microsoft Knowledge Graph, because at least that's a little bit more tangible for people to understand. Oh, all the stuff I did in 365 can all be connected. Oh, I get that. All the data being in a lake doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
No, and it doesn't. And having done work in supply chain, you know, the idea of the warehouse, right, is a very familiar one to me. But if you actually have ever spent time understanding the inner workings of a warehouse, right, it's quite complicated.
Well, yeah, I'm very much. Every time someone says data warehouse, I always think of the last scene of Citizen Kane.
The last scene in Citizen Kane, when he finds
when the camera pulls out and you're in a massive warehouse full of all of Charles Foster Kane's possessions, and actually what you're seeing there is the one possession he did want, but he was actually lost in this warehouse of stuff that he collected that he didn't actually really want to use. He just wanted Rosebud the Sledge. Sorry, that's a spoiler for Citizen Kane. It came out in 1943. I'm allowed to do spoilers for a film that old now, I think. I think it's 1943.
Yeah, not perhaps so. They are more understandable. You're right. Orchestration and data meshes, they are a harder concept to get your head around. But the bottom line is, and it's my prediction, and you know, you've been saying about getting them right in 12 months. I've been doing predictions for years, and it's taken way longer than 12 months for some of mine to ever come through. But seriously, if you are an automation vendor, or you are somebody in the world of content and document, if you don't get your head around these things and you're selling to big companies, it ain't gonna work. It ain't gonna. These are the missing bolts, if that makes sense, that pull it together. So no, I'm big on this one, but in full disclosure, I think I had this last year as well.
Well, you know what? Just keep predicting it till it comes true, Dan. Is that going to work for you?
Yeah, I might have it next year as well. We'll see.
Yeah, that's okay. Hey, I got a question. So, who coined the term data mesh? How long has it been around?
Do you know the first one I heard using it? I don't know about you, Matt. Was Appian, but it doesn't mean that they necessarily.
That's data fabric.
That's data fabric. You're right.
That's data fabric. Now, the difference between a data mesh and a data fabric, I think, comes down to. Yeah, well, exactly, Dan. It is 6 of one and a half dozen of another. Although I'm sure people who sell that at an enterprise license level will assure you there are very strong differences.
Right.
Yes. There are. Yes, of course there are.
So it sounds like it's fairly recent then?
No, well, the concept's been around a few years, but
the concept is very simple, Dan. There's two places you can put the data. You can put it all in one place, or you leave it where it is and link to it. That's basically the two ways of doing it. You put it into one lump and you can call that a warehouse, or you can call that a lake, or you can have a logical connection to it when you could call that a mesh, you could call that a fabric. And I'm sure there are important differences between the two, but those are your two options.
Yeah, and it's the same with a knowledge graph, basically, right? You know, I mean, if you remember, the whole ECM thing was a single source of truth. We'll get everything and we'll put it all into one repository and it'll all be there, because it never happened. And, you know, the knowledge graph, if you like, is a way where you can theoretically leave stuff where they are, but build those connections. So hence we've got them in the same prediction here. It's that ability to make connections between disparate data, silos, systems, whatever. And it's needed. It's really needed, because RPA's really, you know, picked up, maybe not in terms of revenue, but in terms of use, right? Because, hey, it's simple, I can fix this thing. But these big processes, that's hard, and it's getting harder.
And my final question for you is, so does Oracle have a data mesh?
Yes, whether they call it one or not, I can't remember right now. Yeah, they all sort of do. Yeah, they're at various stages, if that makes sense, right? But yes, I mean, they do, because again, it comes back to that thing that, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you were going to put everything into one instance, and it's just not going to happen, right? And data warehousing was, in a sense, the first step towards this with ETL and everything, right? So, yeah, but it's moved on. That makes sense.
Apparently, from what I've been reading,
expanded.
What I've seen in a lot of decks, and I'm not going to mention any names here, ETL not required anymore.
Not required.
Apparently, ETL, that's dead. Don't touch ETL anymore. I think they're nodding, going, "Oh, really?" Well, we'll see about that.
Yeah, well, the one thing we do know, and we should have put as a prediction, is nothing ever dies in IT.
No.
Ever.
No.
Ever.
And I still pass trucks on the highway. I pass lorries on the road here that have telex numbers on them. So.
Yeah. Oh, telex, and as we've talked about a few times this year, US healthcare in particular, take away fax, healthcare system would stop.
Oh, I mean, fax is still heavily used in the NHS here as well. Yeah.
So no, nothing ever dies.
So that kind of petered out at the kind of right kind of point where we're actually almost bang on our time. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Alan. That's 12 months of predictions. We will come back and we will revisit them on this event next year, where Alan will say, well, maybe next year, and Dan will be, I told you it would happen, and I'll just try and forget mine altogether. Next time, so episode 11 will be in 2024, where we'll have 3 more topics and 30 more minutes to discuss them in. Until then, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, and happy holidays, happy Christmas, happy New Year, happy whatever. And this year has flown by.
Indeed. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye.